All right, party people, y'all know what it is. It's your boy Hakeem Green, channel live and direct. BDP all day, every day, here on Madism TV. And man, we're gonna have a powerful discussion today, ladies and gentlemen. I got somebody dynamic, dynamite, somebody who I've known for some decades now, from the hometown, who has some really interesting stories, and how can I say, this whole police brutality conversation. He's done his due diligence. Let me just say that, from being a retired police officer, sergeant for East Orange Police Department, he did 20 some odd years there, and then he went back to school. With a focus on examining police interaction with the Black community, specifically Black males. So we're going to get into a little bit of all of that, over the next, as long as he has to sit with us. Because with this brother, I can sit here for a while and chop it up. Let me best believe. He looks like he could be my big brother, for real. So, when I bring him in, you may, oh man, Hakeem did some futuristic. This is Hakeem, a couple years. This is my brother. So we're going to do it how we usually do it on Madism TV. I'm going to throw up a song just so we can invite people to the conversation and make sure we have a lively comment section. I'm going to ask y'all, my people out there to share the thread, like, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend. We got Dr. Lacy Davis in the building. And we're going to get it in. We'll talk about police brutality, law enforcement as relates to the Black community. And first up, took a test.
No KRS-One said, Hawk, you want to get down with BDP? You got to take this test. You know what I mean? I was ready. Here you go. Make some from nothing by uttering the word. Niggas don't get it? I must be stuttering from the herb. Y'all be cluttering in the burbs. Hovering with nerds. I'm trying to build shelter from the oncoming purge. Donald Trump is tripping. I'm trying to stave the surge. Do it for the bricks. With friends from Laughing Market merge. Get my brothers out the county. See the city re-emerge. I'm trying to keep it straight. My people living on the curb. This motherfucker got the nerve. Must not have heard. I'm tired of the pimps pushing fees in the perbs. Fire with the bars, metaphors, and the verbs. I wanna see him go to college, not make him whores on the curb. So disturbed, so stay high as a bird. Niggas want this smoke, hit me up, you'll get served. I'm sick with technique, I'm ill with the maneuver. DJs want my effect like they were straight out the sewer. I'm talking, I'm a doer. Find me in the viewer. I'm so underground, you're just the Barbie in the sewer. I'm a grown man in this young world, I feel like I'm Rick the Ruler. I'm trying to get all these bars, but I'm not Robert Mueller. The rhymes I say, sharp as a nail. Witty as can be and not for sale. Always funky fresh, could never be stale. Took a test to become an MC and didn't fail. The rhymes I say, sharp as a nail. Witty as can be and not for sale. I'm DMC to quickly blaze them with a run. Pressure on y'all, shrivel up, raising in the sun. I can blaze you with the gun, rather raise you like the one. In the hood y'all sweat it out, but I remain the champion. Smoky like the bear, bring fire to your camp. When I light up the air like wires in a lamp. Coke in your ear, hear the fire and get amp. I got that choke, keeping near, always fire when I jam. My flow absolute style classic, got the proof. 0 to 100, know the ledge like the roof. Make them disappear out of thin air, they go poof. Facts come and go, Hakeem remains the truth. The rhymes I say, sharp as a nail. Witty as can be and not for sale. Always funky fresh, could never be stale. Took a test to become an MC and didn't fail. I drop jewels. Science, mathematics, language arts, social studies, lyrical gymnastics, style, charismatic, pragmatic with the sentence structure. Smile is aromatic, fanatic with the ism structure. Back to the subject, how I school MCs. I get checks off the blue cheese. UMCs, they used to call me powder, then I blew UNC. Taking y'all back to school like fools in truancy. I rock with the teacher like the board education. Funk doc with the reefer, got a script for medication. Get A's for dedication on my way to graduation. Hand in hand like diplomas rolled up. Congratulations. The rhymes I say, sharp as a nail. Witty as can be and not for sale. Always funky fresh, could never be stale. Took a test The rhymes I say, sharp as a nail, witty as can be and not for sale. Always funky fresh, could never be stale. Took a test to become an MC and didn't fail.
Ha, you want to get down with BDP? You got to take this test, nigga.
Keep that.
Yes. That is Took a Test by Hakeem Green, produced by Amin Ra Lawrence, video shot by Turtle Gang. Big shout out to everybody involved. Next up on Madison TV, we have my brother, Dr. Lacy Davis. Dr. Lacy D. Davis founded Black Cops Against Police Brutality in 1991 and is the author of Black Cops Against Police Brutality, a Crisis Action Plan. Most recently, Dr. Davis completed his doctoral degree examining the factors relating to police officers shooting unarmed Black males. He is a retired New Jersey police sergeant who served for 20 years in the East Orange Police Department and commanded the Community Services Unit. Davis has received 12 police department commendations and an expert firearms award. With no further ado, let's bring in my big brother, Dr. Lacy Davis. Hey, D!
What's happening, Hakeem? How are you?
I'm doing great, Doc. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show. You know, whenever I can get you involved in anything, it's to my benefit. It's always a great addition. You know, be it the illegal broadcaster show we used to do back in the day, of course, 24 hours apiece. You know, coming out and speaking to the Newark community, you know, letting them hear some things that they need to hear, putting some things in a certain perspective that we appreciate from you. You know, but before we get into, the whole police brutality conversation and law enforcement's relationship to our community, I would like for our viewership to get a sense of who you are, where you're from, how you came up, and what got you into law enforcement.
Sure. So I'm from Newark, New Jersey, as you know. Harlem born, Newark raised. And so I've spent most of my life here. Elementary school, high school, went off to college at Drew University, had my first experience with racism up close and personal, had never been called the N-word until I got to college, and jokers throwing bottles at us as we're trying to get to the train station to leave Drew to get back to Newark. And that was our ongoing experience. So college was a rough ride for me. I came out of school with a 2.1 grade point average, and it was the best I could do. And I always tell college students that. They're like, what do you mean a 2.1? I said, listen, I was trying to survive just being Black in this racist world on a college campus that brought Black and brown students from the inner city, but they had nothing for us. But that was also my foundation. I became a police officer to finance my music career. I wasn't trying to help people. I didn't like people, and I didn't like being police. That wasn't why I went. I went because I wanted to finance the music career, and I thought it would be a stable job where I could buy a 3-family home, use one rent to pay studio time, one rent to pay the mortgage, and one rent to put in the bank. And certainly I did that at 23 years of age. I saved every check for 6 months and used all of that money to put down on a house. By the time I was 40, I had bought 4 houses. So that part of my career worked. All right,
not to interrupt you, Doc, but the mindset of, or the statement, I didn't get into law enforcement, for the community. I got in to get a check to finance my other situations.
Correct.
Right. And that mentality seems to be a prevalent mentality for young officers, young men and women who are looking to get into law enforcement. And it's just, I appreciate that honesty that you just shared, because it really does well in understanding the mentality of the people policing our communities. So I just wanted to highlight that and hopefully drift back to that point. Just in, full disclosure, when I put up the flyer, Dr. Lacy Davis is going to be in the building. Some folks reached out to me and, from East Orange, and they were like, you know that guy? I was like, well, I'm sure the guy that I know is probably not the guy you know. Right. So in describing that mentality of I'm going into law enforcement to really fund this other thing, and how that shapes how you behave in the community, how you deal with the community. Can you talk about some of those experiences?
Sure. So for me, I fell in love with Black people by year 3, year 4, because I just simply questioned things I was seeing. And the things I was seeing was the disparity in treatment of how Black and brown people were being treated as opposed to white suspects. I also questioned the idea that it was approximately 272 police officers, of which about 70 of them were supervisors, of which 24 were Black supervisors, the rest were Caucasian supervisors. And so I couldn't understand how the blackest city in the state of New Jersey had one of the blackest police forces, had the whitest supervision. And as I began to develop my critical eye and analysis, and because I said I was only staying 5 years. I mean, I had a plan when I went in. I'm staying 5 years and I'm getting out. But the more I worked in East Orange, the more I fell in love with Black and brown people. And I found myself, because it was 1991, 30 years ago, this past March, that I founded Black Cops Against Police Brutality. Because what I realized is that what I was looking at didn't make sense to me. And every time I questioned it, I got more blowback from my colleagues.
Right.
Death threats eventually followed after that. So my interaction with the community, because I came from a musical background to begin with, I saw the world very differently. I saw the world, I didn't have the words then, but as a creative. And so I'm a percussionist. So I had a rhythm to what I was trying to get accomplished, and what I saw going on didn't match that rhythm.
Yeah. Now, before you actually go into the, before you become a police officer, you go to the academy. Before you decided to go into the academy, before you decided to take the test, like, you went to Drew, so you had a certain foundation. But like you said, going into law enforcement, you weren't really thinking about the security of Black folks. You were like, I'm trying to get this check, right? But what was it like in the academy, not just with you, but some of your peers at the time? Like, because, I come up in the 80s. I was born in 69, 1980, the 80s. I'm in junior high school. I'm 13, 14, 15 when crack really hit, so I saw Task Force, TNT. I saw all those, the way law enforcement responded and kind of so it was like, what's the mind state of folks going into law enforcement? I had the opportunity of going into corrections at one point, and I'm like, no, I'm not really built for that. Like, what's the mindset of a person going into law enforcement?
So let me say, I think that, it ranges, right? From, Black people in law enforcement is not a monolith. So for me in the academy, and the people I was in the academy with, I went in the academy with 40 officers. Of the 40, roughly 22, 23 of us were of color. And so the mindset for us was really, I think, even some of the officers that turned out to be not so good later on in their career, I think everybody else, most of us started in a place where we simply wanted to do something different than what we're being exposed to. Like, I'm only a little older than you. So I came in the police force in 1986. I had just finished 2 years of college. I finished 4 years of college, and after college, I taught for 2 years at Arts High School, my alma mater. So I taught for 2 years. I was 21 years old saying, listen, I need to do something different. I don't want to teach for the rest of my life. So I think I'm going to join the police force. And that was it. The police academy was paramilitary, point blank. You didn't have, the racism wasn't overt, because you don't have to tell white men that they're white. They know they are. You don't have to tell them that playing field is leveled in their favor. It's natural. It's just as natural as you knowing your name and breathing air. And so what they do is they spend time in the academy telling you, you're not Black, you're not Latinx, you're not white, you're blue. And the reason they tell you that, because what I think they do, or my looking back at it now, is indoctrinating you away from your race. My mentor, Dr. Howard Seeley, used to say, the more you're educated in America, the more you're educated away from your race as a Black person. And so in the academy, it was the indoctrination. The academy was several months, about roughly 4 months in the academy. And so you're learning, you're being broken down, you're learning to work as a team, you're learning to work as a collective, and you're being punished whenever you break out as an individual. So for me, it was a difficult time at times in the academy, because even then I was speaking up for the underdog, regardless of their race. Even then I struggled with things that didn't make sense to me. but I still fought back. And so I figured I need to get through this academy. So let me get through it. Like I wasn't good with firearms. I eventually became a firearms instructor. So anything that I was weak at, I tried to make it my strength because I worked harder at it. I mean, you needed a 75 to get through firearms. I graduated with a 76 in firearms, but I later was able to shoot 100 with both hands when I became an instructor because I was going to excel at whatever I was struggling at.
Right. Now, like I said, I came up in the 80s, in East Orange. First I lived across the street from Raleigh Park, Bush City, 114 North Arlington. I know it was hot over there.
Yeah, it was.
It was hot. And then we moved up the hill, which that was kind of up the hill too, but we moved up the hill to Park Avenue between Prospect and Woodland. So it was still, it was still calm, but soon come, clouds, the dark clouds soon come. But I will say that I didn't meet you until much later, like the mid 90s, right? But my experiences with East Orange Police Department in the late 80s and early 90s wasn't good, and I wasn't a trouble kid. I wasn't I wasn't out there like that. But it's kind of like we were all looked at a certain way. We were all treated a certain way. It was not really much interaction with law enforcement to discern who was who, what was what. There wasn't that relationship, really a strong relationship, even though these are Black and brown officers. So if you can help me understand that relationship and why, as I'm just a citizen, why would I feel that way from the inside out?
Why would you feel that way, or why would the Black police officer feel that way? Which one?
Oh, well, why would I feel that way in terms of relationship between myself and law enforcement?
Because that's the nature of your relationship. It's really simple. It's the nature of the relationship. In the police academy, we're taught.
Even in the Black community with Black police officers. You said the white shirts were the brass was white, but still.
Yes, because I think, I know better, but for purposes of explaining this at the very basic level, I think that it was naive of the Black community, understandably, but to believe that in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, when they fought to get Black officers on the police force, the presumption and the assumption was that Black police officers would fight and stand up for the rights of Black people and change the relationship between law enforcement and the Black community. However, we know from the founding of the National Black Police Association in 1972 by brothers and sisters from across the country that didn't happen. Now, they came forward, those elders that preceded me, the Renault Robinsons, the Howard Sappos out of Chicago, the Gene Claytons out of Cleveland. They fought this fight that we're having and talking about right now. But the generation that came after them, and I would say it's my generation that came after them, were confused Negroes. And they suffer from what I call CNS, confused Negro syndrome. Black people in positions of authority more concerned with doing the right thing than doing the right thing. And at that time, the right thing was going along to get along. Famous Thomas Todd said in a talk one time, he said, when they wanted one, they send one to get one. We can't forget Serpico. We can't. When
they wanted one, they used one. They sent one
to get one.
Get one.
Right.
That's a strategy, ladies and gentlemen, that is used on us repetitiously, and it works like a charm. I'm sorry. So it's obvious, right? You got the counterintelligence program that now begins to be talked about. We still have brothers and sisters riding in the belly of the beast from the struggle of the 60s from counterintelligence programs. There's no question that there are people in jail who have not committed a crime, but they're still in jail doing time. That's a reality. And prior to COINTELPRO, we're talking about, first of all, J. Edgar Hoover, okay, that was his life's mission to destroy Black people and Black leadership. One of my former mentors worked for the federal government, and he said to me in the 90s, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to keep you alive because they're going to kill you. You don't have no idea the toes that you're stepping on. And so Black officers, I felt then, and I feel even more now, we had a responsibility to the community that launched us to at the very least stand up and defend the community. And as I said to some of my colleagues, and if you're too punctified
to stand up and defend the community, that at least give us your money so we can have some tools to fight back with, like some of the punks in other communities.
Yes.
Play that position.
Yes.
So what happens is that you would feel that way as a young black man, because you felt that way from the force, and I felt that way on the force. Because we're talking about fighting systems and institutions, and what we fail to recognize that regardless of the race of the officer, it is the institution that shapes and forms that officer. It's like the presidency. Whether Barack's the president or number 45 is the president, the institution remains the same, period. And that's what's happened with law enforcement. The institution has not changed. It started as slave catchers in the South and union busters in the North, and not much has changed regardless of the race of the officers.
Yeah. So you say you go into force 86, you create the Black Police Officers Against Police Brutality in 91. In 91, right? What was the switch? What was this is like, people say, Hakeem, what was your transformation into, who you became? It's a very specific year. It's a very specific set of circumstances. Even though I had the foundation and the roots, I can tell you in 1988, I read the book Autobiography of, I was going through some things on college, and some older brothers pulled my coat and told me how I was playing myself as a black man in so many ways. And they suggested Autobiography of Malcolm X, and it was sitting there in my library at home. Mom had it in the crib, just never read it. I picked it up and I read that book that summer. And since that point, I've been a different Hakeem. The Hakeem is the Hakeem is. So what was it for you in between 86 to 91 that flipped that switch to say, I got to step up?
I saw the Elizabeth Police Department beat an off-duty East Orange police officer, Hosea Reynolds, who wasn't a friend of mine, but he was treated very poorly as a young black man walking down the streets in Elizabeth, because they said they saw his shirt blow up and a gun in his waistband. And even after he produced his badge, they still took him in and put him in a holding cell with everybody else. Okay, that was a point for me. That was a turning point. I got to see white suspects come in unhandcuffed and black suspects with handcuffs. I came to work, and I was told, they let me work midnight one time, and they told me I had to write X number of tickets. I said, well, in the police academy, they told us that we could give people warnings. And so I'd rather warn the people to move their car, especially since the address that the plate comes back to is parked in front of the house where I could ring the bell and say, take your car off the street, rather than me ticket and tow your car. I wrote 2 tickets that night. They told me I could never work the midnight shift again because I wasn't playing by the rules, which was to write 5 ticket books worth of tickets. I wasn't doing that, and I didn't do that. I just got to see things that didn't make sense to me. So I started asking people, I said, do you lock people up for drunk driving? They said, yes. I said, then why don't you lock up the white sergeant that comes in drunk every day with a white shirt on? He drives the police car drunk, and I smell the alcohol, and everybody else has got to smell it. Why aren't you locking him up? And so I started getting warnings that I should be quiet, that I need to stop asking questions. And so the more I was told not to do something, I did more of it. Hold
on, Doc. Big shout out to everybody in the building. Dashawn, salute, you already know. Clarence, Nadine, Alicia, JT, big shout out. Please, y'all, share this thread, invite people to the conversation. The community, our community needs to hear this conversation. So please bring them in. Back to you, Dr. Davis.
So for me, it was challenging because it just didn't make sense. And so even some of my so-called friends that I come through the academy with were starting to put some distance between them and me. And so I accepted, as I told my family, that this might cause some problems for me. And I'm not asking anybody to die with me. I'm just asking you to respect the fact that I'm going to take a position that may cause some kind of pain for me and my family. And so we had a family dinner. My mother understood and agreed. My family and closest friends understood and agreed. And hence, BCAP was launched. And we had three principles. We wanted to be the conscience of the criminal justice system. We wanted to enhance the quality of life for African people. And we wanted to improve community police relations. That's it.
Yeah. Right.
That's it.
Now, when I met you, you were knee deep in that work right there. I think we met, I don't know if it was before Channel Live or after Channel Live. I know, I met you, quote unquote, in the struggle. I met you, organizing and showing up as law enforcement to be like, I'm here to make this other voice. provide this other voice. Much later, you tell the story of being in Amiri Baraka's house, rest in peace, putting together, I think it was the Newark Anti-Violence Coalition, or maybe before that, but
before that.
It was before that, but there was a mix of people. I think Daruba was the first time you met Daruba.
I mean, this was after Daruba. This was the 90s. This was the early 90s when I went to a meeting at Raz's house. They were challenging. Well, Daruba I met in 93, around 92, 93 on the stage at City Hall. And when I got up to speak, they turned their backs on me. We got to talk again. Daruba and other Black Panthers. They said, you're a pig and we don't have no respect for you as a pig. And so as I got up to speak, they turned their back. We were on the stage together. They turned their backs to me the entire time I spoke. And when I saw Daruba again, it was at a conference in Baltimore, Maryland. And at that conference, when I walked in with my people, he was with his people. He looked at me, I looked at him. He walked around me, I walked around him. And then he opened his arms and says, I got nothing but respect for you, man, because you've been consistent in this work. And we were good. When I went to Raz's house to a meeting, because they were challenging me, well, if you committed to the community, why don't you come to one of our meetings? Now, nobody told me it was going to be a 6-hour meeting. And so when I went to the meeting, they took me, at first I got to the door and they saw it was me. They said, you can't bring your gun in here. So I went back out the house and put the gun in the trunk of my car. Then I came in, they said, okay, now we got to search you. So they took me like in a little laundry room, and 3 or 4 guys said, I need you to stand on one foot. And if you come off the foot, we're going to sweep you and beat you down. And so I stood on one leg, they patted me down. He said, now switch legs. And if you come off that leg, we're going to flip you and beat you down. So after they searched me, I was unarmed. They let me sit down. One brother sat on one side of me and another brother on the other. And so every time I made a comment, the brother turned around and says, I can't stand pigs. I ignored him. And so I made another comment about a half hour later. He says, I can't stand pigs. I ignored him. So finally, when I made a comment, he says, I can't stand pigs. I said, I can't stand pigs either. So what else we going to talk about? And so that's how we began. And that's how the doors began to open up. And what I tell most Black officers, I said, you need to have that kind of experience in the Black community because it's humbling. It brings you to your knees. It makes you understand how you're treating people in the community. And we were treating people in the community the way we were trained to treat people in the police academy. So what I recognized was what they were training us to do to our community, we weren't doing to their community.
Right. Now that's what I want to say. How we were treating people is how we were trained in the academy.
Absolutely.
But how we're treating our people is not how we treat their people. I
That's
saw
correct.
There's a report that just got released, California law enforcement, how they have a quota system. They found that Black and brown people and the people of the LGBTQ community get stopped far more frequently than white people, though it's far more likely you'll find something illegal or illicit on a white person than you will.
Absolutely.
Right. And that was the same thing in New York City with Giuliani and then later Bloomberg with stop and frisk. How it was like hundreds of thousands of people stopped over a 4-year period in like a 6-block radius. And only like 0.3% of the times did anybody ever have anything on them. So why are you wasting all this money just to target a community? And you don't do that to Wall Street. You don't do that to the Upper East Side, West Side, and so forth and so on. You don't go to Staten Island and do that to them on the other side of Staten Island. You don't do that to them. And I had a conversation with a law enforcement friend earlier today, just about the treatment, the difference in treatment between the two communities or the varying communities. And him being a person of color and an officer, retired, he feels like he must defend the job. Even when there's no defense, he feels like he's gotta defend it. The program getting us off the, he say we treat our community this way, but we don't treat their community that way. And brother, how come you don't have a problem with that?
Well, that's easy. Kochel, who's a researcher, did a study of the Black police officers in St. Louis, Missouri, 2020. And she coined a phrase called double marginality. And that's where Black police officers are showing an allegiance and an alliance with their Blackness and their occupation, which is the police force. And that's problematic. Du Bois in 1903 calls this the double consciousness, is where you as a black man see yourself through the lens of someone else. It's problematic. But this is what I said to you earlier. This is about an institution that gets to raise black officers and brown officers by institutionalizing them to the tone that, to this context of, you are not black, you are not brown, you are blue. And so we began to look at our community through a different lens, from another perspective. And if you are not grounded either in your Africanness or your spirituality that is grounded in some facts as opposed to fiction, you will find yourself following the leader who is leading you anywhere or any place other than toward them. And that becomes problematic. And for me, because I was raising questions about them, like, for example, I remember being in the police department one time and I'm speaking to the female inmates on the second floor. And as I'm speaking to them, one of the sergeants, Caucasian, says to me, "Damn, Lacy, you know all the bitches up here." And I turned and said to him, "Your mother's in one of these cells?" And of course, that caused a problem.
Bring it home.
Okay. But my attitude with them was, you will not disrespect my community and think that I won't give you the same for your community.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so, you know, my boy, really good guy, really good dude. I don't want to, you know, cast any aspersions his way. You know, we have these conversations often. He's 5'0", and, you know, I'm always a little contentious when it comes to 5'0", but I have a lot of people that I respect and love, such as yourself and him, who are law enforcement, you know. So I know, you know, all officers aren't the same, and it is a systemic problem. So, you know, in that, I like to, you know, touch on your research, what you received, your doctorate training, and, you know, what your thesis was about, and how you proved yourself in terms of your stance. I don't want to misquote or get anything wrong, so I'm just going to let you lead us in.
Well, I just gave you some of it talking about Du Bois and culture, right? Double marginality and double consciousness. So my research was police use of force, examining factors relating to police officers shooting unarmed black males. And I use a North Jersey Police Department, 30 officers of every race, gender and age. And we use 4 scenarios in a simulator to examine police officers' reaction time and error rate. And what I was looking to understand is whether or not an officer's race, age, years of service, or place of residence impacted their decision to shoot or not shoot an unarmed black male. And my study, while it was a study specifically in this city and on this police department, it was not generalizable to the larger population, but it also didn't sustain my hypothesis. And my hypothesis was that one of those variables would impact the decision to shoot an unarmed black male. And out of 120 observations in the simulator that I observed in my study, only one person shot the unarmed black male. The others did not. Now, interestingly enough, while it did not support my hypothesis, people would say, well, what do you attribute that to? It could be that that particular department, which spent a great deal of time on verbal judo, on improving the community police relationship, on changing the culture of that department, may have had an impact. I also argue and found in my study that the impact may have gone too far, because in my study, 12 of the 30 police officers were killed in the scenarios. And so what I proposed, based on some of the limitations of my study, was that we consider in the future not only following these officers in these 4 scenarios in a simulator, but also making sure that they had body-worn cameras and see if they behave the same way in the body-worn cameras in a scenario as they did in the simulator. So that's pretty much the study, and I continue to do that kind of research.
Well, that's interesting, because my conversation with my friend earlier today, we talked about officer restraint and how that goes left sometimes. And you just said in your study, you've proved that with this particular police force, that color, race, these other categories didn't have an impact on the decisions. That's but right. At the same time, them not making decision got them killed 12 times.
That's right. That's correct.
Now, because, you know, the streets are the streets.
That's right.
It's a war zone out there. It's a jungle out there. I had a conversation with another friend who's on the other side of the conversation in dealing, in terms of things that have happened to them with their experience with law enforcement. And, like I tell my wife, yo, man, what you expect? Like, you in the streets. Like, we know what the streets are. That's what they are. So being an officer and having love for your people and not wanting to do wrong by your people, not wanting to be that police officer who's brutal, who oversteps his bounds, who, breaks the law. How do you stay safe on the job when you're in these streets?
Well, I think that
how do you do the same thing?
You still have to do your job. There are the instances where I've used force, and you're only supposed to use the necessary force to effect a lawful arrest. People have asked me that question. Well, have you used force? Of course. I shot a guy. So folks said, well, how did that go? I said, well, he lived to tell that I shot him. I said, but guess what? When I went to court, which offended the prosecutors, I shook his hand every day. And folks said, why? They like, you can't do that. I said, because you want me to hate him. He grabbed my gun and got a round off at me. I got my gun back and got a round off at him. He was doing his job. I did my job better. And I am not going to carry that burden with me for the rest of my life to see him as this enemy that you want me to hate. That's the streets. Mm-hmm. That's force. And sometimes you've got to use force. The nature of policing can be brutal. So I don't negate that fact. What I recognize is that, but we don't, for instance, I was looking at a news article in '97 where I testified against a black officer because he hit somebody in front of me handcuffed. That's where we got to draw the line in the sand. What I say to officers, and especially now, because I have the verbiage for it, I don't give you permission to ruin the possibility of my child going off to college because I have no pension. I don't give you permission to cause us to lose the mortgage on our house. Now, if the joker's uncuffed and his hands are up, you have every right to go round for round and bring his hands down. The moment his hands goes down, he says, I surrender. He lays prone on the street. He lets you cuff him. The fight is over, period. I have been in the streets of East Orange where a drug dealer known to me as a drug dealer saw me trying to make an arrest, and jokers attempted to jump me because I couldn't get to my radio. They snatched it out my hand. He said, ho, ho, ho. Ain't nobody jumping this dude because he's fair on these streets. Now, y'all want to fight him one-on-one? Line up. And I always give Hank Allen his respect from 19th Street for being that kind of righteous brother. And the brothers was like, Hank, he said, look, this dude has been fair. He don't let nobody put no drugs on people. He ain't beat nobody. Nobody's jumping the officer. Otherwise, it's me and him against y'all. Now, I've also been in the cell block as a punishment assignment where cops was putting on leather gloves that they was getting ready to go in the cell and handle somebody. I happened to walk in on it. I said, what we doing? Oh, Davis, this ain't got nothing to do with you. Go back upstairs. No. This look like it's got something to do with me. Y'all got on leather gloves. It's 90 degrees outside. What y'all getting ready to do? Mm-hmm. So the dude was popping off. So I took off my gun belt and locked my gun away and got my gloves. They said, what you getting ready to do? I said, it's going to be a tag team, me and him against the two of you. If y'all win, he gets another charge. If we win, I lock the two of you up and he comes out the cell. You got to take a principled position. You got to find the courage to do what you said you would do. We took an oath to protect and serve the people, not the police.
Wow. Dashy, you talk about, the police policing the police. You're talking about, internal affairs, which, people go, does it really exist? You got the police policing the police. How does that work? How does that work in your experience as law enforcement, now retired, in hindsight? And I, there's the specifics, and then there's the national. Like, every community is not the same. East Orange, right, is not the same as Parsippany. I'm sure Parsippany is not the same as LA. But, right, there's some really, it's kind of consistent in terms of, policing the Black and brown communities and then people being held accountable. So internal affairs, like what's missing? What's the process and procedure that's not there, or that is there, that's lacking?
I would say this. I would say that you've laid it out. It's the whole gamut. There are places where it works and it has worked well, and there's places where it hasn't worked at all. It's not that there's anything missing. The issue is accountability. whether people have the fortitude and the political will to hold officers accountable. When Clifford Minor was the prosecutor in Essex County, Newark Police Department prosecuted a lot of cops, lots of cops. Internal Affairs worked. Okay, we know that in progressive departments, one of the things that happens across the country is that you take internal affairs out of the police department. Why would you re-traumatize people? I've been beat up by the police and you want me to come back to a police station where the cops that beat me up maybe and then file a complaint? How does that work? Right? So I'll give you an example. I mean, I've seen it work well in East Orange and I've seen it fail in East Orange. I went in and testified. Well, I gave a statement against an officer, and 5 minutes after the officer left Internal Affairs, he came after me. It didn't work in that instance because Internal Affairs told him it was me. I was supposed to be protected. Now, I've also had an instance where an officer knocked someone's teeth out in East Orange, and I went to the chief of police, and the chief of police says, we will investigate it. And it was investigated appropriately, and charges were brought. So it's not the issue of what's missing. What's missing is accountability, whether we're going to hold people accountable for their actions. And I've always said that you don't have to worry about controlling the police if you control the people who control the police. That's why I tell people there's a reason why you should vote. There's a reason why you should vote in blocks. There's a reason if you don't like who's in office, then you run for office. But that's where all the power lies. And if we don't understand that, this is why we're on the outside looking in, begging somebody to hope they don't beat and kill us in our community when we give them our tax dollar to beat and kill us with.
Okay. Now, so while you're at that point, you know, I came back to home, Jersey, Newark, East Orange, Orange area, you know, immediately connected with my brothers, Amiri Baraka and Raz Baraka, when Raz was still a South Ward councilman and principal at Central High School. And you know, while working at the International Youth Organization, IYL, you know, I would follow the Newark Anti-Violence Coalition around and you know, watch over the course of, you know, 5 years, every Wednesday, rain, sleet, hail, and snow, Black people protesting the gangbangers, Black people protesting the Black on Black violence. Oh, you guys come out against police brutality, but you never protest the gangbangers. How come you don't protest Black on Black crime? Well, we saw the Newark Anti-Violence Coalition do just that all around the Newark community every week, every Wednesday, rain, sleet, snow, hail, and that in addition to the organizing of the people, and then you know, with other organizations running Raz to be the mayor, and then that, you know, local political power of Black people primarily ensuring Raz be the mayor of one of the largest cities in the country. That being kind of like what you were saying in terms of political power and how that's, you know, in terms of Newark police last year didn't fire their weapon one time.
Yep.
You know, there is a community review board in the Newark, in Newark. There's the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery. Big shout out to Keisha Yuri. Some of the money that funds that comes from the policing budget. So the idea of political power translating into real power. Can you talk more about that?
Sure.
And,
well,
I was talk about the Newark Anti-Violence Coalition too, because you were part of that birth.
So I was one of the founding members of the Newark Anti-Violence Coalition. Myself, Ras Baraka, David Muhammad from the Nation of Islam, and Vinny Tretch and Vinny Tretch and KG from Naughty by Nature, and many others came along. But we did the first protests out there on the street corner at Meeker Avenue and Elizabeth Avenue, where his sister was shot sitting on her steps at the building with a baby in her arm. And so we decided that we would go wherever violence was occurring in our community and protest, and we would shut down the street. We didn't care who didn't like it. We weren't going to ask for permits, and we were going to run the risk of being arrested. And we did that for several years. Keisha eventually and others took over the leadership, as they should. People like me, after 2 or 3 years, we stepped away. Bashir Akinyele and others continued with that. Brother Baba Zaid Muhammad, and on and on. But that is where it starts, right? That is the concentration. That was many of us coming together from different walks of life. You know, there was also, as you said, some of the gang members were out there, or we call them the street organizations. So there was a group called SOS, Saving Ourselves, right? Bloods, Crips, and everybody else coming together. There was a gang truce in the city of Newark, New Jersey, and folks understanding that we had a common interest. you know, we call it black on black crime, which I think we should call something different, because we know that each group kills its own group. So white people kill white people, Asian people kill Asian people, Latinx people kill Latinx people, and black people kill black people. We don't call it white on white crime. We don't call it Irish on Irish crime, but we want to, again, vilify black people. The social reality is that you can engage politically. You can put your people in place. Other folks do. You don't get young white folks on councils and running for Congress and running for office if they don't have a concentration of people who are taking power and deciding they're going to wield it in their best interest. We're the only ones that stand outside the system throwing rocks and throwing bricks and wondering why the system doesn't work in our favor. And I tell people all the time that, I mean, it's a means to an end. You don't have to do everything in it. You simply have to understand, what are my goals? What am I trying to achieve? And make it your business to go for it. And we've got to work together. You know, it's funny because when Raz decided to run, we had a conversation before he ran the first time. And we all said we would work together and work collaboratively together. And we've done that. In fact, some people have said to me, well, why would you support Raz? I said, it's very simple, right? We're not going to love everything that everybody does. But if we can agree on most of what's getting done, then we should be supportive of each other. And we don't always have to be out front. That's the other piece. I've been in New York most of my life, and folks say, well, Brother Lacy, I don't see you on the streets anymore. You're not going to see me on the streets. I'm a damn general. That's what I tell them, right? If I'm on the streets 30 years later doing the same thing I was doing 30 years ago, I wasted my time and your time. 30 years later, I need to be stepping back and making sure that I share my platform with young people. I'm working with social workers now, bachelor students, master students. I'm working with young leadership people, masters of public administration, bachelors of public administration, making sure that young people understand how these games are played, how power is accumulated and influence, and utilizing it effectively in their own best interest as a collective.
Yes. Yeah, it's you know, the issues facing our people they're so layered.
Yes.
You know, so layered. But the one thing, you know, we can't get around is, again, you know, law enforcement and its relationship to the black community. This is like the history of it, dating back to the paddy rollers and the slave catchers, you know, all the way through up, you know, to now. We look at some of the more high profile, let me not say high profile, the more visible tragedies that we've witnessed over the last, you know, 10 years, you know, from Trayvon, you know, all the way up, you know. I mean, you can't start with Trayvon. It's just too many to, you know.
Right.
Yeah. You see the response, the Black Lives Matter movement, the protest, you know, during 2020. Do you see any changes happening? You know, we just looked at North New Jersey and leadership, you know, the Ras Barak and what happened there. But, you know, do you see any other changes around the country that gives us some you know, some positive, something to feel?
Well, I have a lot of hope. Let me say this to you. I have a lot of hope. So we have the Malik organization in New Haven, Connecticut. So Malik Jones was killed around 1998 by the police on April 14th. East Haven police officer said he was in a car chase. The East Haven police officer was in a van. He chased him to the corner of Grand and Murphy at 6 p.m. on the 14th, and the officer jumps out the car and tries to reach into the car and turn the car off. Malik is driving. The officer pulls his gun and shoots Malik in the chest. And in his deposition, he says that Malik gave him a defiant go to hell look, so he fired several more shots. Malik was unarmed. So his mother, Emma Jones, who's an attorney and a dear sister and a friend, we got involved in that case with her. And it was only last year that we were getting Civilian Review Board in New Haven, Connecticut. They also have a Malik law in Connecticut that requires police officers to have to give the information of who you stopped, why you stopped them, what the race, what the ethnicity, all of that kind of stuff. So that's hope. That's change that happens there. We've got folks, I've got folks in Louisiana who are friends of mine running and getting onto the boards of education. See, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing says there's 9 people area activities that are dominated by racism and white supremacy. And if we want the world to change, we either have to get into these systems, tear them down, reform them, or rebuild them so that they're fair and just for everyone. They're economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, sex, war, and religion. So we just need to pick one of those areas.
Hold on, Doc. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing says
the ISIS papers.
There's 9 areas of human activity.
That's right.
Right. that we need to involve ourselves in or dismantle, and they are
economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, sex, war, and religion.
So that's the chessboard right there, ladies and gentlemen. And we have to be on each level of this game and synthesize them all to really be effective in what we're looking to do. You've been traveling the country for some time, doing lectures, town hall meetings, sharing your knowledge, sharing your wisdom. You actually introduced me to, one of my icons, Coach Powell.
That's right, Alfred Powell. That's right.
That's right, Coach Powell. So, I was, in terms of the Black conscious community in Harlem, late 90s, early 2000s, you get a Coach Powell DVD, and it was a Message in the Bottle was the name.
That's right.
Message in the Bottle. And the brother is doing a lecture in front of a small group. It's a dark room. Mind you, this is on a DVD. It's not on YouTube. There's none of that yet. This is just the DVD. And this brother's going in. Where's he originally from?
He's from Dayton, Ohio.
Dayton, Ohio. And he's got a Midwestern twang to his voice, right? But you never really see him because he's in the dark. The projector's going on the wall or the screen. You never see him. You just hear his voice. And he's got like your uncle. It's like that voice. You know that voice. So he's giving you this information, and it's a voice that you recognize, that you know. So the way the information is coming to you is just like you wide open, and he's breaking down how the message is in the bottle, how through media, these commercials, advertisement, just the repetition of images, of symbols, spiritual symbols that you have no idea. So it's a commercial for beer. But in it, there's, like images that that's a Bible quote. Look, see that? Read that passage right there in the Bible. All right, now look at that image and tell me what you see. And you'll see the Bible quote on the bottle of alcohol. Woo! Message in the bottle. So what they're doing is they're relating to you. He said it's psychosocial,
sexual, spiritual warfare.
See those different levels of the playing field, ladies and gentlemen, of the chessboard? They're hitting you when you turn on the Super Bowl and watch these commercials. They getting you. So Coach Powell, Message in the Bottle. I don't know how you could find the brother. Maybe Dr. Lacy Davis could give us the brother's website, but I had to share that with my viewership because So I've been following this guy loosely since the early 2000s. I didn't have his connect. I just had the DVD, lost the DVD, can't find a DVD. YouTube gets created. I'm on YouTube trying to find Coach Powell, Message in the Bottle. I can't find it nowhere. I'm on the phone with Lacy like a month ago. And he said, I do these lectures around the country with Coach Powell. Wait a minute, stop. Coach Powell, what Coach Powell you talking about? You can be talking about any Coach Powell around the country. Football coach from the baseball coach from the. But he's talking about the Coach Alfred Powell. He put me on the phone with him at the speech for that. Long story, all the way around the block. But the point was, you put me in contact with somebody that means a lot to me, and thank you.
I love you, brother. And let me say this to you about Coach Powell. So, Coach is my man. We've been together since the 90s. And one of the things, Coach Powell, Dr. Tyrone Powers, Sister Valerie, Sister Gloria Long Grove, who's also from Ohio, he and I met at Columbus State University at a lecture. And we said we were going to break the myth that Black people can't come together as total strangers, do business together, and never have a problem. And we've been doing business since the 90s. We've never had a dispute, never had a fight. And there are about 15 of us now all across the country from here all the way to LA. And we do this work together, right? So Coach Powell, and it's funny, as you just described it, that DVD you're talking about is our video that we did in 96 when I had him as a guest at one of the National Black Police Officer Conferences.
That was your event?
It's our event.
Our event. Man,
yes.
It's small. See how...
As soon as you described it, I'm going, I got that thing because it was like one of them little them video camera things, and you could barely see him, but you could see everything on the wall.
You could see everything on the wall. And
that was our event.
He did the Budweiser with the 3 frogs.
Absolutely. That was our event, right? I didn't even know it was on DVD, but we in the hood, right? Look, I had to do bootleg me, so I already know. But the book is Message in a Bottle, and you can't find the book anywhere because the liquor company bought up all the plates and the book. The second book is Message in a Bottle, the 40-ounce, The Scandal Continues. And then his other book is Hip Hop Hypocrisy, When Lies Sound Like the Truth. I have a chapter in that book. And so we've been doing this kind of work because we see it. And so I brought him in, and he still comes in to train my staff. And we just finished doing a whole male mentoring conference in the Quad Cities 2 months ago. Wow. So we recognize the need for this level of work at all these different levels that we just talked about, as you called it, on the chessboard, and just getting busy. See, I think we spend so much time talking smack. I tell people I want a moratorium on rhetoric. In fact, since you like playing games and you like challenges, I challenge you to let me look at your work and describe what I see you doing besides nothing. That's where we need to be. Stop talking smack. Stop bumping your jaws. Do the work. Everywhere in this country, like you asked me about hope, I can name someone from here to LA. So if you've seen Cheryl Dorsey on CNN, that's the sister with the salt and pepper hair, retired sergeant from LAPD. The show 911, 911, the TV show, the cop show, she's a consultant for that show. So she helps to shape that message on that show. She's got a couple of other shows she's doing. And people say, well, Brother DeLacy, I didn't see you. You don't need to see me. We're helping to shape the message that's going out into the world. Reddick Hudson is on MSNBC. He's a brother that was on the St. Louis Police Department. He left them and started doing civil rights work in Missouri. He's on the front lines. We came together to form the National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice, Reform, and Accountability. There's about 25 of us from about 10 states across the country, and we just do the work. And everybody at the table does the work. Another hopeful space is Sheriff Rochelle Bellow. She comes from the mud of Philadelphia. She's the first woman elected sheriff in 186 years, and she ran against a two-time incumbent. He had $1 million in the party. She had less than $100,000, and she beat him by 20,000 votes. That's the community coming together to pool its resources to determine this is who we want to police in our community, and this is how we want to be policed. And then those folks will bring our companies in to do the training, right? I'm consulting for several big organizations here and training their police officers and security guards to say, this is how you police in our community, or you don't get to be in our community. It's simple. Do the work.
So, the optimism. I had Raz on last year on the show, and I asked him a question that, in hindsight came off kind of silly, right? I'm just re-ask the question and shape it in a way that's, So, as I look at the political landscape nationally and locally, right, I'm seeing more and more of the people that I recognize in positions of power, or let's say positions of influence. Be it governorships or mayoralships, congressmen, senators, state attorneys, judges. I see a lot of individual, separate, but seemingly influential people in place. And I watch what happened over the last few years with the spirit of these young folks getting out there and organizing Black Lives Matter movement. Whether you're pro Black Lives Matter or you're not really with it, you can't deny the impact and the influence, the spirit of activism and organization, and then the understanding of politics and government and civics. And I just noticed a reemergence of that over the last few years. And I look at Kamala Harris, it's questions in terms of who she really is. A lot of people are against her, and I get that, I understand. But, she's a sister that graduated from Howard University, who it's like a chain, it's like a line that I could put people in place that goes right to the vice presidency. I could put, I personally know people in positions of power that if I wanted to get to a senator or a congressperson, or, you know, it might take me some work. I might have to jump through some hoops. I might have to bend backwards, but I could actually touch these people. That's deep for me, coming from a time when, you know, in the 70s and 80s, that was not the reality at all. And it made me go, man, it's in terms of the question of reparations. Reparations is not something they're going to give us. It's something we're going to give ourselves by being in power. Now, I'm not talking about 2022. I'm talking might be 2030, might be 2035, right? But every year we keep focus and we push the line and we take these individual pockets of power and influence and unify them, like you said earlier, to blocks. Man, we could do a lot of work as a people without having to necessarily, you know, the revolution, and people looking to fight the war, the system. Nah, man. Nah, I'm saying you got to be in those 9 levels. You got to be in it and influencing it with a purpose, whatever level you're on. You're in law enforcement. Now you're in education, activism, education, entertainment. You know what I mean? So I know I'm rambling kind of, sort of, you know, but the point is, you know, I can see us winning if we haven't already won and just don't know it.
So I agree with you. I'll give you one quick example of what you just talked about. In the late 90s, I don't even remember what year, Derek Green was a 16-year-old young man that heard me speak when I was in my 20s. He was 16. He was with the Urban League, and they kept trying. He and a group of young people kept trying to bring me in as a keynote speaker. And the Negroes that were older than me were terrified. They said, he's too radical, he's too extreme, and he can't be your speaker. And they would never let me in. But I would meet them on the street corner. I'd be anywhere young people were and talk to them. Also, same thing with the NAACP youth divisions all around this state. Well, Derek Green eventually went on to become an aide to Senator John Corazine. And Derek Green reaches out to me one day as a 20-something-year-old young man and says, Brother DeLacy, everybody's coming down here begging for a job. I want to show you how to get real money to do the work that they wouldn't let us do with you when we were at the Urban League. And so I pulled some of my folks, the people who knew better than me politically, and we were able to put in a request for an earmark. And we were approved for $1.5 million. And after it was cut up, Congressman Donald Payne on the House side supported Senator Corazine. I took 7 young people from the East Orange Newark community with their parents' permission to DC to tell their sad damn story about how hard life is and could be and how much better it would be if you gave us this money. After it was all said and done, we were given $850,000. We put together 20 young people, including the 7 who went to DC, who became our youth leadership coalition in East Orange. And I said, how do you want to spend your money? I didn't pay me from the money, and we hired 2 people from the community. They were able to go to Ghana, West Africa, hosted by President John Kufuor, who invited them back continually to come to the country in his house. We took them to South Korea to the World Peace Games with Reverend Sun Myung Moon, okay? Not because we were trying to convert anybody, but we want to expose them to other young people around the world and all over this country. Free of charge, children from East Orange and Newark community. And when we took 2 basketball teams to South Korea. And what happened is the team that beat my East Orange teams in the championships, we then went to them because they were from Newark and said, would you like to go with us as a combined team? And so we took a big girls team, little girls team, big boys team, little boy, and took them all to South Korea. $66,000, all expenses paid. That's just one example of pulling resources together. Now, all those young people now are in their 30s. And they're now having their children, and they're talking to us about the impact that this has made on their lives and now on their children's lives. That's the work.
Yeah. That's the real work in real time. And it's not always on TV, but it's happening. I don't know, we just don't, we don't see it. We've been so programmed to be anti. And, I got to take some responsibility because we're going to circle this back around law enforcement, in terms of the position of anti-police. You know I don't fuck with no pigs, right? But, how I was saying to the brother earlier, the only large group of organized Black people allowed to hold arms is law enforcement. You need law enforcement. Why? Because that's the only organized group of people. Like when you talk about, you protect your life, liberty, and pursue happiness, how do you really do that? When enemies and, is it was good from in and out, your enemy could be, you gotta protect yourself. But where we from, the only organized group of Black people allowed to have that power is law enforcement. You need law enforcement, but you need to control law enforcement so it works for the community.
Absolutely.
So, getting our people to not be so anti-law enforcement. How do we change the community's, perception of it? We know law enforcement has a role to play, but us as community folks, how do we change our language and how we talk about law enforcement to each other?
Well, I think we have to, what I hear you saying is that we have to change the narrative and we have to change the relationship. So if you want to change the narrative, you change the relationship. You want to change the relationship, you got to change the narrative, right? I mean, they go hand in hand for me, because at the end of the day, even as brother was telling me he hated pigs, I was still in the room with you, getting the same knowledge that was being dropped for you was being dropped for me. In fact, what we now could argue is that you should have hated pigs less and loved what we were doing more, because I've been able to take the information and knowledge y'all gave me and soared with it and passed it on and passed it on and passed it on. And you might still be sitting in that chair talking about you hate pigs. So what I say to some of my brothers and sisters that are the antis, who I know well and some of whom I tell them, let me be clear with you, because some of them now are anti-Ras Baraka. Let's be clear. Right? They wasn't always, but they are now. And what I said to them, if Ras Baraka took a seat in another country tomorrow and we gave you the chair, we'd be lost tomorrow morning. Because you've done nothing to prepare for leadership. You've done nothing to prepare for passing the baton. You've done nothing to educate yourself and the next generation, but yet you're anti everything that's in front of you.
Thank you.
That's what I mean by the rhetoric, right? One of the things, I run a family support organization. There are 15 in the state. I also run the agency that trains all 15. One of the things that the people of the state say all the time, Dr. Davis's agency runs itself. Why? Because I have young people, 15 college interns mixed in with my staff, and we teach them how to run the agency. Why? So that when you walk away from me, if you've taken the time to learn what we're trying to teach, the African proverb says, when the student is ready to learn, the teacher will appear. You are supposed to have a hands-on experience that permits you to lead now, not later. We've had 70 young people come through my agency over the last 7 years, which we're proud of, because most of them are in the social work field and thriving and flourishing. That's how you build that legacy. That's how you institution build. That's how structural racism. I've always said institutional racism requires an institutional response, not 2 or 3 super Negroes like Hakeem Green or Lacy Davis. No, Negro, what are you doing institutionally? You're always going to have 2 or 3 Negroes doing well. Systematically, what are we doing?
Yeah, systems is like, that's the thing that we get one-offs, but how do we create the system so it's not a one-off? It's repeated over and over. The key to success is find something you do well, and then do that over and over and over and over again.
Absolutely. So Hakeem, to change the narrative, 1, let's hold police accountable. 2, let's find out who the police are and what they do. 3, let's put some police on the police force. See, I've done all those things, right? Because it's necessary to do. So I've had the opportunity to go in and train the police, both in Newark and other departments. I've also had the opportunity to have we help, like in Philadelphia does it. I know that Bridgeport, Connecticut, Black police officers do it, and a couple of in New York did it, where we train the community to take the police test. We sit down and train them so they can get on the force, right? Dr. Tyrone Powers talks about this all the time because he's a counterterrorism expert. You can never counter that which you don't understand. So don't tell me about what you hate if you have no understanding of what it is that you think you hate. You got to study it. My mentor, Dr. Seeley, made me study the police.
Spook that sat by the door comes to mind.
Sam Greenway. You got to know it. You got to do it. do the work. People say to me all the time, do you miss the police force? No, I'm still doing police work. What do you mean? I just don't have the gun and badge. I'm still doing the same work I did as a community activist, as a community police officer committed to this community. I still live in the community. I waved to the drug dealer waved to me. They're just not going to sell in front of me, and I'm not going to let nobody do anything to them in front of me. We're even.
Okay, so being a firearms expert and instructor.
Yes.
And you know, excuse me if this is out of left field. What's your favorite firearm?
A Sig Sauer, P226, P226, P220, and an SP220. It's my favorite because one, it shoots dry, it shoots wet. It's easy to put together, take apart. I can do it with my eyes closed, and it's got about 4 or 5 pounds of pressure, and it's accurate, right? And you can get it used, and it still works. So that's my favorite.
Yeah.
I love it.
What about rifles?
Winchester. You know, I don't do a lot of them, but yeah, Winchester's cool. Okay. And I haven't, you know, I shoot twice a year to qualify to keep my permit, but that's it. Wow. You know, because I get a retired officer's permit.
Yeah. You know, I'm down here where, you know, it's, you know, and I have one of the top ones not too far from my house. Oh my God. And so, you know, I need to get much better. And hopefully I can get with you at somewhere. Maybe we could take a visit down to where I'm at.
Yes.
You can give me some lessons. I can hopefully.
Yes. It's sight picture. It's trigger squeeze. It's breathing.
Yeah. I'm so used to the hand tilt. It's a tilt that my hand.
That's because you've been watching those movies. Listen, watching those movies and jokers shooting like this here. I'm like, what you gonna do with that, dude? Right? You can barely shoot right side up. You all sideways in the movie.
Right. Yeah. You know, but you know, this is a side conversation. You know, our conversation is 24 hours of peace, love, unity, safety, having fun. That's what we're about. You know, but being able to protect yourself is definitely you gotta do that. And
I think that the FBI has said it, and we've known it. The greatest threat right now in this country is domestic terrorism, and that isn't us. And so, you know, as I've said to folks, Black folks that are open to the idea, yes, you should get a permit to have a gun in your home, right? To protect your home. You have a right to bear arms, you should bear them. In fact, I tell Black folks we should join the NRA in big numbers. They'll change the rules tomorrow. Right? Go ahead. Yeah. Tomorrow.
Yeah, we know they 67, right? Was it 67?
Brother, listen, that's exactly what the Panthers were doing. I mean, you've got to change the game, and we got to be in all the rooms so that we understand what's going on. At the end of the day, they're going to have to deal with this. What we know, one thing I know for sure, and I'll leave you with this note. January 6th proved one thing, if nothing else, and that is that police officers who said that they were scared of Black and brown people unarmed, walking with a candy bar, crossing the street with a book bag near me in fear of losing their life and shooting us, had all the reason that they needed to shoot people on January 6th, and they only fired one shot. So they demonstrated the greatest restraint and perpetuated the greatest fraud on Black and brown people.
Yeah. Because
you had people with guns at you, bear spray and sticks and poles, and you ain't shoot none of them.
None of them.
Not none of them.
Well, that whole, you know, restraint thing is out the window. We know restraint can be exercised. It's just a matter of who you choose to do it for, who not to do it for.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Dr. Lacy Davis, my brother.
My brother, I love you, Brother Hakeem. I appreciate you, and I respect your work.
My man. Yeah, so we're gonna have you back on in the near future. Hopefully we can line up Coach Powell. You know?
I will do that for you. I'll listen, I'm gonna do you one better. I'm gonna line up Coach Powell for you. I'm gonna line up Dr. Tyrone Powers for you, and I'm gonna line up Sister Rochelle Bellow, Sheriff Rochelle Bellow from Philadelphia.
Let's go.
I'm gonna do that for you.
Thank you, my brother. Ladies and gentlemen, let me put this back up here. I need you guys to check in with my dear brother. Check his website, drlacydavis.com. He's doing some tremendous work with young folks. You need to support his organization because he's still connected to young people and helping them in all different types of ways. So check in, with the website. Follow the brother. He's dynamic, and we love you, Dr. Lacy Davis.
Love you, brother. Thank you, and peace to the family. And thank you, everyone that signed on. I saw all the folks in the chat, a bunch of friends and family there. Thank you very much for the support.
Yes, sir. Salute.
Peace.